So we are going to be going over the display and controls on the ChipSpreader. So on the display panel, you have your four-wheel drive switch, you have your turn signals, emergency flasher, parking brake, ignition obviously, low lock, transfer case, high, neutral, and low, beacon, work lights, and headlights. Your display is going to display your pounds per square yard in the top left corner. It's going to show your cam percentage open. And also on the cam percentage, you change from just by touching the second button down here next to the cam information. You can change back and forth from turning the cam from automatic mode to manual mode and off. So if you're rotating the machine, you can turn it off so you don't have extra wear and tear on your cams. In manual mode, it's going to go to the preset percentage that you will see here shortly in the settings page. This one's currently set to 40%. And in auto, it's going to automatically go to the percentage that it calculates it needs to be at based off shot rate and ground speed. It displays FPM in the center. It shows you what gear the transfer case is in here, DEF level, and diesel level on top. It also shows if the parking brake is set. The top right square here is the total tons, yards, and feet for the entire job, and you reset that by holding down this switch here. The one below that is just for that individual shot, and it is reset every time the master switch is turned on, or the spread switch. Below that, it's going to show your gates. It's going to show how wide you are. It's going to show how many feet you have activated. And for a particular foot to be activated, two things have to happen. You have to have that foot turned on. So the actual toggle switch for that foot turned on, and you have to have it selected with the taper switch over here. So if you look at the display here, if I taper in, it grays that outer foot out. So I did that with the taper switch. If I taper it back on and then turn that on-off switch for that particular foot off. So yeah, you have to have the foot selected with the taper switch. And you can see I just tapered that one off, so when it turns gray, it's no longer selected. I'll taper it back on, and then also for the on-off switch for that foot, if I turn that off, you can see it goes gray there as well. So two things have to happen in order for that foot to be activated and to actually come on when you hit the master switch. You have to have the switch turned on, and you have to have it selected via the taper switch. So, and then the entire 20 feet of this machine is selected, so when you hit the master or spread switch, you can see they all turn green, which is saying that they turned on, and then you can either taper through everything, or you can work individual on-off switches for every foot on the machine. Across the bottom of the display, you have engine parameters, RPM, engine coolant temp, hydraulic temp, battery voltage, and air pressure. So hitting the right button will bring you to the menu, and option 1 here is settings. Under settings, you have your PSY correction. So that is how you would calibrate the machine. So this cal value right here is what you want to keep track of, and then you make percentage adjustments essentially with this value here. So if we select this, you can run it up and down, and you can make small incremental changes. Like you can see, we just changed it by 0.2, and it raised it from 1008 to 1017. Let me go ahead and put that back where I found it. Balance, this is a helpful feature that only affects the right-hand box. So if you're calibrating and you spread over your tarp and you get the left side dialed in, but the right side is still a little bit light, you can increase the balance, and it will only affect the right-hand box and make it a little heavier. So you can just dial in the right-hand side independently of the left-hand side to make it match. Simulate FPM is just a helpful two things. You can use it to troubleshoot, and also if you lost an FPM sensor, if you had an FPM sensor fail, you could turn that on and use it to get the cams to actually open to finish a job out for the day. Below that is FCal, and that's what's going to calibrate your foot per minute sensor, which is in the hydrostatic motor, the drive motor. And that just calibrates it to keep track of linear feet correctly. So it's actually totaling materials correctly. And this is the manual cam open percentage like we showed you on the home page. If you select manual on the home page, this is the percentage it's going to open to. So if you push that button, you can increase or decrease. And then hit OK to save it. And also in this page is hopper setup. So this is where you tell the machine how wide it is in total. So this is a 10 to 20, so set to 20 feet. Here you can turn your width sensors on or off, so we just disabled the width sensors. So this is helpful if you have a width sensor failure. You can come in here, disable the sensors, and then the machine is always going to work like it's 20 feet wide. So now it's just going to be stuck at 20 feet. Even if you bring the boxes in, it's just going to stay 20 feet. So it's not quite as handy if you're trying to taper across or do a radius or an intersection, but it does allow you to at least use the full width of the machine in the event of a box width sensor failure. You can add extensions. You can add one extension per side, and this is where you would tell it if you have extensions. So you would just increase it to one or both sides depending on where you put the extensions at. So the second option here is diagnostics, and there's a bunch of really helpful stuff on this. You get switch diagnostics that shows you in real time. You can see all the switch working, so if you have a function that isn't working right, you can come in here and check and make sure that the computer is actually seeing the command. The propel page, you can come in here and you can see your stall pot and speed pots. The stall pot, a good way of thinking about that is like a stall converter on a drag car. The further you turn the stall pot up, the more RPM it's going to take to make the chip spreader move. So you can see here this value is increasing, and it is a 0 to 5 volt signal, so it should go from about 500 millivolts up to about 4,500 millivolts. You can see that increase and decrease. So with it all the way up, the machine's not going to move until 1900, 2000 RPM. And the speed pot, you can see that value moving there. It's the same 0 to 5 volt signal. The speed pot limits the top speed of the machine. So if you have the speed pot turned all the way up at 4,500 millivolts there, the machine is going to go full speed. While you're chipping, you can turn the speed pot down. If you know you're going to chip at 400 feet a minute, you can turn that way down until your top speed with the throttle all the way to the floor is only 400. And then your stall pot, you can turn up until the machine won't move until 1800 RPM. And basically what that allows you to do is you can keep your foot completely floored in the throttle all day long. The machine's not going to go faster than 400, and it's always going to keep your RPM up above 18 or 1900 RPM, so you have full hydraulic power. It is possible to starve the hydraulics of this machine if you don't keep the engine revved up. Also, the auger, the computer will not stroke the auger valves until you're above, it won't fully stroke the auger valves until you're above 1900 engine RPM. And that is just to ensure that you don't starve the rest of the system for hydraulic flow. The machine is designed to run wide open all day long. So the third option on the settings menu here is engine. So this shows you, you can see the engine RPM, you can see the oil pressure, percent engine load, and you can see the cooling fan requested speed. So whatever is commanding the engine fan to be the highest level is going to take precedence. So if the engine needs it to be on at 50% and the hydraulics need it to be on at 25%, it's always going to go with the higher percentage or whatever is demanding more. Engine hours, if you have any fault codes, you would see it there. And also you can see that is emissions stuff there. I believe it's enable and disable regen or postpone regen. You will also have emissions lamps display here if something is happening that's requiring them to be on. But that's where you would see them, is right there in that empty box. The wheel path page, that would only be active if your machine did not get these switches here. So the individual gate switches are optional. If your machine, if you did not get this option, you would have a page that would come up there, and what that allows you to do is to isolate gates in the center that you do not want on. So there's two arrows you can move in there, and you can basically tell it in between this left and right arrows, these gates are not going to come on. So if you turn that function on and select 3 or 4 center gates, and they just won't come on when you hit the master switch. And if you start tapering all the way across and you're doing an intersection, the taper switch will skip those 3 or 4 gates that you have selected. That's just a helpful feature, and without the gate switches, you can't really do it without that page. So yeah, that is pretty much everything in the display of the ChipSpreader. Over here on the main control panel, you have your forward and reverse switch for the drive function. That's your hitch control, so you have hitch open and close and up and down to line it up with the truck. Stall pot and speed pot that we just talked about a minute ago. Cruise control, turn it on here, set it with this switch. And this doesn't actually set it to an exact speed, it sets it to an exact engine RPM, which is something to note and keep in mind. But if you're going to be chipping for a really long stretch on an open interstate, it is a handy tool to have. The meat line, what the meat line does, as you get to your oil line, instead of, if you've got your spreading master on, instead of turning master off, you can hit the meat line, and the computer is going to count how far you back up to catch the next truck, and then it will automatically fire the gates again as soon as it gets back to that meat line. And you have a meat line adjustment there that is actually in inches that will control how much of an overlap you have. Generally, we set it 10, 12 inches, and it will give you a 10 to 12 inch overlap before you get back into the oil again. Master switch, open, close. Obviously all of your individual gate switches. A PSY, so you can do PSY 2 ways. You can adjust it up here on the display, and also down here it's just much quicker to do right here on the control panel. Just your hands right there on the master switch all the time anyway, so yeah, we have it in 2 spots. Those are the taper switches. So there's a left hand and a right hand one. Both of them will go all the way across. So if you're trying to taper from 20 feet all the way down to 1 and you're trying to get an angle, you can use the left hand switch to taper all the way over into the right hand box. And vice versa. You can use the right hand switch to taper all the way over into the left hand box. These are the belt and auger switches. So you've got two options on this switch. If you put the belts in the master position, the belts are only going to run when you have the master on. If you have them in the auto position, the belts are going to run until the ultrasonic sensors in the front of the machine see that the boxes are full, and it will automatically shut them off. I would highly suggest just running them in auto and letting the sensors do what they do. It will keep the box full. Same thing on the augers. If you put it in the master position, the augers are only going to come on when you have the master on. Same thing though, I would let the sensors work. There's a big paddle switch out in the end of each hopper, and as the auger pushes material out and pushes that paddle switch in, it shuts itself off. I would just utilize the auto function unless you have sensor failure, switch or sensor failure, and then the master option is there for you. You got two manual switches here, left belt, right belt. Up turns your belts on, down turns your augers on. Your station shift, so the station that we are sitting in right now shifts left to it rolls on this track assembly you can see right below us, and it just allows you to see whichever side of the machine you need to see. This is optional, but this machine does have the receiving hopper, the folding receiving hopper, as you can see behind us. It's in the folded position right now. It is up. It's a very popular option, and it allows you to fold that up and really get, at the end of the day, all the material onto the conveyors and up and out, so you don't spend as much time shoveling. But this switch right here is what opens and closes that. Next switch here is the vibrator. The vibrator only comes on when you have the master on. So you leave the vibrator in the on position. As the gates open, it helps keep material from bridging. So if you use coated chips that are more prone to bridging, the vibrator is a great option. And here you have the front hopper in and out. So you've got a left one for the left hopper, right one for the right hopper, and then there's a switch to work both of them simultaneously.